Welcome to TeamTalk from TeamKinetic, the podcast that takes a deeper dive into volunteer management. With me, Chris Martin. Hello and welcome. Over the next few months, we hope to bring you a whole range of really interesting conversations that we've had with volunteer managers, volunteers and sector leaders. We want to dig a little bit deeper than you normally get to dig into people's thoughts and ideas about volunteering and the future trends for the sector. When we first had the idea about having our own podcast, we really wanted it to be both entertaining and informative. So please do drop me an email at info@teamkinetic.co.uk or get us on any of our social accounts and let me know how I've got on. Or if you've got any ideas for interesting speakers, topics that you'd like us to cover. So let's get started. Our first ever guests on the TeamKinetic podcast are Ian and Nicola from the Willowbrook Hospice. We talk shop, quite literally, and get into what really motivates their volunteers. So with no further ado, let's get started. Today we are joined by Nicola Ward and Ian Turnbull from Willowbrook Hospice in St Helens. Nicola is the Volunteer Engagement Coordinator for Willowbrook Hospice and Ian Turnbull is the Volunteer Engagement Lead. Ian is currently, as is the joy of working with volunteers, currently otherwise engaged in the office with some other work, but he will be joining us shortly. But we thought we'd get started with Nicola because Nicola, you're responsible for an awful lot of the work around using TeamKinetic. So I guess it would be good to start with yourself and get a bit of a sense of what you do day to day and how you find using the product. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started as a working in volunteer management.
Well, volunteering is relatively new to me. So I've only been with the organisation since April 21. And prior to that, my background has been more recruitment within the NHS and within education. So volunteering in the third sector in general is something that was really new to me and really interesting because it's completely different to any other sector that I've worked in before. Volunteers are completely different to students and to obviously people within unemployed people as well. So it's a completely different kettle of fish for me. It's all very new. And also when I started within volunteering, it was a tricky time because COVID was in play. So I actually started before most of our volunteers were allowed back into the workplace, which was actually quite a nice time to start because it gave me a chance to get used to the TeamKinetic system, to have a little bit more of an insight into how Willowbrook worked and how the organisation worked with volunteers, and to do a little bit of research really on the job before the influx of volunteers went back out. So that was really interesting. We are really fortunate because we are a small organisation. We just cover St Helens and parts of Knowsley. However, we are really supportive within our local community, and we're lucky enough to have 570 registered volunteers. Not all of them are active at any one time, and people kind of help with events, or they'll be more working on set shifts. But we rely really on our volunteers to run our organisation, and volunteers massively outnumber staff, which is fantastic.
Which is great. Yeah, that's. I mean, in a perfect world, that's what you'd like it to be. But while Ian sorts out his sound problems,
that's it.
There we go. We got you, Ian. We got you.
Yes, helps if you take it off mute, doesn't it? Hello.
How are you doing? You okay?
Yes.
Happy New Year.
I'm due. Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's just nice to have you joining us. Just saying, the joys of working in volunteering. There's always something going on somewhere. There's never 5 minutes peace and quiet.
No, it isn't. Absolutely hasn't been today. Anyway, and of course, somebody's lolling around at home. Of course.
Well,
Not mentioning any names. Anyway, carry on.
Nicola was just telling us a little bit about her sort of her previous life before volunteering, and then just doing a little bit of an introduction to Willowbrook. I guess if we can ask you the same, Ian, tell us a little bit about how you came to work in volunteer management.
Right. Well, it's very boring, but I worked for the NatWest Bank for 25 years, and then left and my wife was in the bank as well. We both left, relocated back up here, and then the job in Bury Hospice came up, doing the same role, which obviously in Greater Manchester. So I applied for that, and they gave me the job. I was there for 3.5 years, and then the job in Willowbrook, which is nearer to my home, came up. 14 years ago, and I applied, and they gave me.
Wow, you 14 years in,
and I've been here ever since. Yes.
Wonderful. And tell me a little bit about sort of going from banking to volunteer management. That's quite a career change. That's quite a change of gear, shall we say?
It is, and everybody said that, but it is and it isn't, because I was always customer facing.
Yeah.
So I've seen the great British public in all its glory in various guises, as you can imagine, and dealing with volunteers is quite similar in that you're dealing with different personalities, different people each day. So it wasn't for me that big a shift, although I appreciate from the outside it does look as if it is. But from the dealing with people point of view, it was quite similar.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, because Nicola, you said that you went from that sort of recruitment background, and although you're still doing recruitment, the actual volunteer part of it was quite different. Yeah.
It's completely different. So yeah, because my background has been very much recruitment and dealing with people and employability. So it's been working with 16 to 18-year-olds. Then it's been working with already people that were in work in the NHS and trying to get them into new roles within the NHS.
Yeah.
So now working with volunteers where it's completely their choice to come
that
and
motivation
work there.
piece. Yeah,
It's completely different because they don't have to do it. They're choosing to give us their time, which is fantastic. But that motivation shift is hard to deal with, because I'm used to people that are either taking the first steps into their career, getting into an apprenticeship, or looking for a career change. Whereas this is someone that's potentially finished their career altogether and looking to do something to fill the time. So it's a completely different, but as Ian said, it's very varied. It all crosses over.
Yeah, of course. The people part is still the people part.
The people part
that's
still
the bit
the
that
people
doesn't change. Yeah. And I was going to come to this a little bit later, but since we sort of stepped on it a little bit, the next 6 weeks, we're looking at the hospice sector specifically, and we're doing a bit of a campaign across hospices across the UK. But what do you think is the key driving motivation for your volunteers in the sector? What do you think makes them turn up and do the garden at the hospice, or go to the shop, or work in the distribution centre? What are the key drivers, do you think, that makes your volunteers turn up each time?
Well, I think, certainly for applying, I think it is a lot of them have had some connection with the hospice. I mean, we all know people with cancer, obviously. And also, I think for hospices specifically, it's that motivation of helping a local charity.
Yep.
I call it localness, which I don't think is a word, but it's every penny that's donated by local people goes to help our patients who are local people. And also every hour the volunteers donate goes to help local people, the patients in the hospice. So that's not to say the other national charities aren't doing great work, because they absolutely are, but the money could be spent anywhere in the country, whereas ours is completely within the 2 boroughs that we look after. I think that's a big motivation as well. I mean, some volunteers come to us because they've had a loved one who's died in the hospice, and they say to Nicola and myself, I don't want to be anywhere near the hospice at all. It's too emotive for me. So they'll come into our other building, which is the Living Well, or one of our shops, or help at a fundraising event. So that can be a motivator as well. And also, it's giving back. It's if you're retired, keeping your mind occupied. It's getting out and about, meeting people, making friends. It's a huge community effort, if you like.
Yeah.
And also hospices have a very loyal support from their local population, wherever that might happen to be.
I think it's interesting that you just said there, what gets them through the door is the cause.
Yes.
What keeps them there is the community and the sense of making a difference and the friends they make. And you've got sort of stage 1 is getting them there, and stage 2 is getting them there, and creating that environment in which they feel sort of valued and looked after is that
That's
secondary
right.
part.
That's almost the most important bit, because it's a two-way thing, isn't it? So we get their work and life experiences, but they've got to get something out of it as well. So whether that's friendship, they're enjoying the cause, they're enjoying what they're doing, getting it. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a two win-win situation.
It is, yeah. If it's done right, that's definitely the way it should feel. I think. Nicola, you started to tell me a little bit about the hospice itself in terms of your volunteers. Just if you're okay to pick up on that, but just tell me a little bit, like I say, about your volunteer cohort, the kind of people that you tend to attract, what you know about them.
Well, it's actually, we're trying to diversify it a bit at the moment and try to reach out to get other types, other community groups involved as well. And what we really want to do at Willowbrook is become a community hub as well as a hospice, because we do a lot of programs within the community now. We've launched a compassionate neighbours scheme where our volunteers go out into the community and meet with people, and they'll do errands for them, they'll take them to appointments, they'll do light housework, and they're not necessarily known patients to the hospice. It's just another side of it. And Willowbrook is really trying to, as Ian said, most people come to volunteer for Willowbrook because they know Willowbrook through a family connection or through a friend. And it's trying to give back to the community as well, because we do receive a lot of support from the community via that. So our volunteers really, I think Ian would agree, we couldn't run without them. We really do rely on them. So all of our receptionists are volunteers. Our bereavement support, most of them are volunteers. Our day therapies, again, most of them are volunteers. The drivers are volunteers that go, they pick up prescriptions from the hospitals, they do all those types of things. And our shops are completely run by volunteers, by one paid member of staff. So really...
How many shops have you got, Nicola?
That's a good question. Nine.
Just testing you.
I think it's 9. I'll check with you.
It is 9, yes.
And you pass. You're okay.
Well done.
I try and list them all in my head when somebody asks me that question.
And you've got the distribution centre as well, haven't you?
The distribution centre is included in that because obviously we do trade from there. So we've got 3 superstores almost within the community, and then we've got the smaller shops as well, and we've also got the cafe now, which is operating as part of the trading company to try and generate money in. So we are trying to find different ways to engage with the local communities and get people through the doors and really show them what Willowbrook is about. And since the summer as well, we've actually invested in a marquee, which has been brilliant for us because it is meant that even with the COVID restrictions in, we can still do fundraising events. And when we do fundraising events, volunteers are fantastic, and they are kind of the people that help run it. So obviously the fundraising team do the planning, but we can have like 30 to 40 volunteers on a day at an event.
They're the lifeblood, aren't they? They're the people that make sure it can happen. Yeah,
definitely. Without volunteers, we wouldn't be able to do what we do, would we?
Of course. So
also some of those volunteers who help at fundraising, that isn't their main place of volunteering. So we've attracted them from the hospice, the shops, and they're just trying it as something different as part of their volunteering experience. And just on that, we do have placements as well, that we develop partnerships with the local prison and Merseyside Probation Service to have
brilliant.
People in to help and support us, and that's worked really well over the years as well. But sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's really interesting. That whole sort of volunteering as a vehicle for employability and rehabilitation, for lack of a better explanation. But that's the role of volunteering as a stepping stone into something else. I think it is often sometimes overplayed as to its value. But I think in your setting, what you've just explained there, that you can see some real opportunities where they get to work in retail, they get to work in care, and those kind of things that will make a real impact on that person's ability to go and potentially get a job, that hopefully keeps them out of any further trouble potentially.
And we've been liaising with colleges and schools, and we're trying to engage younger people as well for various reasons, but one, to show them what the work is that we do and to try and get a new kind of cohort of people through, but also it's beneficial for them as they kind of move forward to see what different career options there are and different things that they can get involved with, because I'm pretty sure that most people wouldn't realise how varied a hospice could be in terms of the roles that are here. So it is important for us to engage with younger people as well and try and show them what Willowbrook do.
I mean, as a business, it's really interesting because you've got the core business, which is the hospice, but then you've got the shops, you've got distribution, you've got online sales, you've got cafe. You're a true community company in that sense, with the care being what it's all about. But fundamentally, that's almost secondary sometimes to all the other stuff you've got to do to pay for that, if that makes sense. So they are the whole idea of us doing this campaign with the hospice sector is because we think it is such an interesting sector when it comes to volunteering, because it has it runs so deeply through the organisation, and there is some real, should we say, significant considerations to the kind of volunteers you can have on site and things like that. So there is some requirements that suit a system like TeamKinetic, and I guess that'll lead me on to my next question. Really, when it comes to your volunteer, a little bit about that process you have in place to safeguard your patients and to safeguard the reputation of the hospice and to make sure the volunteers are having a positive experience. Tell me a little bit about how you manage that as an organisation.
Well, since we've taken TeamKinetic on, it has significantly streamlined the application process for us. And in fact, we have a volunteer who's absolutely fantastic, who monitors that application process. So she does the references for us and everything else, and that is made easier. I mean, occasionally we have to write out because there's no email address or whatever, but that's not really compared to what it was like before, where it was all paper-based, a bit of a nightmare and a paper chase. Now it's much, much more streamlined. So that's easier from the registration point of view, and also it engages with the volunteer already, because it is a process that they have to go through. So by going through the process, they must want to volunteer at the end of it.
Of course,
It's a difficult process because it's a very easy process, but it's sort of
a little barrier to entry is not necessarily a bad thing sometimes.
No,
exactly. As long as it's not too severe. No,
and with the emails that automatically go back to them when they've registered, which obviously we can tailor to Willowbrook, it gives them a sort of, I was going to say warm, fuzzy feeling. I don't mean that, but it gives them that engagement within the organisation from day one without us actually talking to them. Although that's what we do as soon as we get the application. They get the email back, but then within a couple of days, we phoned them and invited them in for a chat. But it's just a quicker way of engaging with new volunteers, I think.
I'm going to borrow that warm, fuzzy feeling, Ian. I quite like that. Welcome to the organisation sort of feeling. I think, I do. I'm going to have that one off you. And then once the volunteer's through the door and that you've gone, okay, this person maybe has care experience, or this person wants to work within the hospital itself. Tell me a little bit about how that process works for you guys.
Well, that process, if they're going in the hospice, they need a disclosure and barring check application, and they need 2 references before they set foot through the door. Everywhere else they don't, they just need 2 references. And obviously the disclosure and barring service protects them and our patients as well when they're on the ward. And that the disclosure and barring service depends on which bit of the hospice they're going to volunteer in, so it can be standard or enhanced, as you know. But the good thing with TeamKinetic is once that's done, which is a separate system, obviously, because it's a government system, we can put those details into TeamKinetic, and then it flags up when it's due to be renewed for us, which is really helpful.
I've got an exciting development to tell you there, Ian.
Oh, right.
In the next couple of, I hope for the next month or so, that'll be built directly into TeamKinetic.
Oh, right. Okay, that's good.
The volunteer won't have to leave TeamKinetic to do their DBS.
Oh, right.
Nice. That would take you another job.
Yeah, that would be handy. And what we're doing is very slowly, admittedly, we are going through the old database with all the DBS details on and
moving them over
over into TeamKinetic, which is really, and that will help us going forward. It helps us with the admin of that whole process, which, as I said, just safeguards the patients basically at the end of the day.
Brilliant. Now, I remember when, before Nicola started and Bev was in role, she mentioned that bringing a digital system had a bit of an impact on the type of volunteer you recruited, in terms of the age profile and things like that. Tell us a little bit about your volunteer. Is it, your if you had a persona of an average volunteer, what does the average Willowbrook volunteer look like?
I think you'd agree, Nicola, they're over 55, retired and female, but that is a huge generalisation because it's interesting that we get all ages embracing the process on TeamKinetic to apply. And we certainly last year, we did get more youngsters applying, more 17. It's difficult, isn't it? Because that middle period, you're at university.
Yeah, you're busy. Yeah,
Being
exactly.
stereotypical, university, get married, you have a family, and all these things take over. As we all know, you're both working, you're juggling everything else. You haven't got time for volunteering. But the youngsters that need the experience for their uni applications or whatever, so they've come on board, and of course they just embrace the technology. They don't even think about it. But we are having older people. That sounds terrible because I'm old myself. But people of over 50,
maturer people. Yeah,
there's no right phrase really, is there? But
no.
Of them applying as well. I mean, I think do you agree with that, Nicola? I think.
Yeah, I do agree. I think there was probably a little bit of apprehension because it was something new, and because with change, there's always apprehension, isn't there? We've gone from paper-based to online, and people do like the online things. I mean, I was the same with banks when everything went to online. I missed going in and actually speaking to someone in the bank, not just doing it online. But we have been really lucky, and I think in terms of the people that are maybe were initially apprehensive, they've just embraced it now, and they are using it more, and they are receiving the emails, and they are replying back to things and getting more involved with things. And also, if they haven't been able to sign up themselves, they're asking for help from family members or friends, or they can contact us and we'll do the online application for them. So we're not using it. It's not a barrier so much now.
It's a hybrid approach. Yeah,
we're trying to help as much as we can, and we don't really. I mean, as I said, I've been here since April. I've probably seen 4 paper application forms in that time, so it is really working.
Well, that's good. That's really interesting. Yeah.
But it's good to have different options for different people, isn't it? And I think that we fully embraced it, me and Ian. Anyway, I don't know life before TeamKinetic, so I can't vouch for
it was terrible. It was terrible, Nicola. Honestly, it was awful.
It was a tad clunky, shall we say, before.
I guess this is for you, Ian. When we originally came and spoke to you guys, and I think it was yourself and Bev, and I think it was someone from your HR team, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, I think the HR manager at the time. Yes.
Yes, and I guess what the next couple of minutes is really to have a bit of a conversation about the barriers you found about introducing this kind of technology into the hospice in the first instance. What was the business case you had to make to enable you to be able to introduce a new piece of technology like this? What were the pushback areas? Where did you find you had sort of where were people nervous, I guess?
Well, I mean, my opinion of hospices, which is probably wrong, is that they're conservative with a small c and they're resistant to change, not in every way. But the previous HR manager was a great paper-based person because that's what she'd known, which is absolutely fine. And so there was a bit of resistance with that because she thought she was losing control of the actual application process. If anything went wrong, she liked to go to the application form. What have you done with this, that, and the other? Whereas she didn't do that. Although she was an admin at one point, so she could have looked at any point. So that was one of them. The cost was the other one, but. Bev found you, didn't she? In fairness,
she did.
And sold it to everybody else, which was absolutely great. Because the other systems that we had, for instance, the rota system in the shops, I needed to know what hours the shop volunteers were doing. So the only way of doing that was the shop manager filling out a paper-based form, faxing it over at one point to me, if you remember. I'm sure they still exist somewhere, or emailing it over. Then I had a volunteer who manually collated it all onto a big matrix, and then we added it all up. So that all takes time. So that was a huge plus point. And also the shop manager can manage their own rotas. Then they can see who's not coming in, who's coming in where, when, and why. Volunteers can self-nominate as well, which was all fantastic. And when we added it all up, and we actually sold it to the trading company manager first, who could see all the benefits for her shops.
The commercial benefit sometimes is the way to go. Yes,
exactly. And also in the previous system, the volunteer database was an access database, which was, again, clunky in my phraseology. So if we wanted to email out to all the volunteers, I could only email up to 200 at a time. So we're sending out all varying different emails. And then you had to go in and do the various shops if you wanted to email them and all the rest of it. So it's very, very clunky. Whereas with TeamKinetic, it's easy to split them up with the group system.
Of course. Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me. And
okay.
also to send generic emails. I'm sure Nicola agrees with them. They're probably all fed up with the amount of communication they're getting now because they email them out right, left and centre, and they cannot say that they're not communicated with. Because they are. I mean, some haven't got email addresses, which is fine, and I think that's only out of our 560. There's only about 120 who haven't.
Okay.
So we just send them a monthly newsletter. To keep them updated, which is absolutely fine. So yeah, it really didn't need. It sold itself, if I was really honest.
That's lovely to hear. That is nice to hear. You mentioned it there about the shop managers, and I guess because we've got you guys on and we're talking about hospices, most hospices have that business model of shops supporting the hospice. Tell us a little bit about the role of the volunteer in the shop and the how you found introducing the technology to the shop managers, because we know that's often a point of fear for a number of the organisations we spoke to. Is it's all right when it's in the volunteer team, but when it goes out to that next step, that's sort of the next group of managers, if you will, there's always a little bit of trepidation as to how that might pan out.
Well, Bev did that again, and I know we had them all in, and Bev did a demonstration of how it actually worked. And then when they went back to their shops, because obviously people forget, you get involved in the old ways, blah, 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 she went out to each individual shop manager and explained it to them. What they had to do. And it's really very straightforward, isn't it? What they had to do their rotas and their hours. Now, it did take a bit of time for them to get to do it, but that's just getting used to a new way of doing things.
Of course,
because as I said, it is very straightforward to do. But once all that was in place, I mean, we do have our volunteer does check on all the rotas even now, just to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Of course.
And by and large, they do very well with it. But once they'd embraced it, which they did, they were fine with it, to be honest. It worked really well. We, in the volunteer hub, Nicola and myself, still look after some of the rotas ourselves because it's easy to do that, and there's no manager available to do it. So we do it. But really, compared with how it was before, the involvement is sort of minimal and very easy. By and large, would you say, Nicola?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think actually it probably makes their life a little bit easier because it's all in one place. They're not having to fill out paper, then fax them over and make sure that they've been received and then check things. And also they can live edit it. So if someone doesn't turn up for a shift, they can just take them out or they can move them around, and being able to access their contact details and everything that they need on there as well. It's really important. Some managers are better than others at using it, but that's the same as everything, isn't it? And some will use it to its full capacity, and some will just use it for the bare
minimum they have to.
The bare minimum. But on the whole, I think it's a fantastic system for the shops because it gives us as well. So obviously, being in the volunteer hub, we need an oversight of when people are in. We can see in advance when people are going to be in on shift, and then if there are any issues, then we can address them before they happen, not after. And we can edit it as well and let people know. As well as that, giving the volunteers the freedom to add themselves into shifts and take themselves off.
I was going to ask about that self-serve. Do you find a decent proportion of your volunteers do self-serve, or is it still quite managed? No, that's fair enough.
Very few. I'd say there's a small amount of volunteers that do add themselves on and are fantastic at their own hours, but on the whole, most people will need their hours added for them.
So that's the way it's been done. So that's what they come to expect. Yeah.
Definitely.
Fair enough. It's always a really interesting one. Again, I think sometimes it's to do with your audience. When you have that younger audience, they're much more proactive in doing it for themselves because they're just more digitally native. Where you say your age group, so that 55 plus, you just want to be told to turn up at that's your shift. You turn up on Monday. And someone sort of lets them know that that's what they're going to do for the next 6 months.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, they're absolutely fine. That's all. You're right. That's all they want to do. Come, do, and go type thing.
Yeah, which is that's what you want for your volunteers. The expectation shouldn't be they have to do any more than that if that's what they want to do. Yeah. I guess moving away from the volunteers a little bit and moving to you guys as as a hospice, we've come out of an interesting, should we say, for lack of a better description, 2 years. Quite challenging, for everybody in all sort of walks of life. What challenges have you found during COVID? And because you guys literally started with us about 6 months before, maybe that might have been 3 months before the whole thing sort of kicked off. So it's been an interesting period for us ourselves working with yourselves. But what challenges have you found, and then what do you think the future looks like in terms of volunteering for the hospice?
Well, the COVID, which sounds terrible, was quite good with us and TeamKinetic because everything was locked down. So that meant that we had a chance to communicate with all the volunteers because obviously they had to put their own register again.
A little bit of breathing space, yeah.
Yeah, it did, yeah. So we spent a lot of time getting them to re-register, explaining how they had to do it. And by and large, it worked really well. Some of them didn't get it and we had to register. It was absolutely fine. So excuse me, it gave us that breathing space. But, also communication meant it was easier with the volunteers because you could just whack an email out of updates for COVID or the hospice or whatever was happening. The up and down, the lockdown and the non-lockdown caused a bit of chaos because obviously with the rotas, they were all fixed. So we had to go in and take the rotas out, all the rest of it, which is absolutely fine because they weren't there anyway. But it did help with the monitoring of people coming back as well, because they would, when volunteers came back, they had to come to our Living Well building to do an infection control course, which is basically washing, especially in 2020 when they were coming back.
I do remember that, yes.
Yeah, in that July. So they were all coming in here. But again, TeamKinetic, we were able to monitor it through that, which was really helpful. Sorry, what was the other bit of the question?
And then the next bit was, moving forwards, and not so much about the technology, but moving forward, just for you guys in general, what sort of challenges do you think are lurking around the corners? We come out of the back of this, and there's been this massive national volunteer response. Do you foresee any issues, any potential plus points that may have come out from this big volunteer? Clearly, the last 2 years, the volunteer has been central to the response. Do you think people are going to be exhausted from this, or do you think there's going to be a new appetite and a new impetus around volunteering? And how do you think that might impact you guys at Willowbrook in terms of the work you do?
I think for us, in terms of the volunteers that we already have, I'd like to think that they know how important they have been to us, and we've tried to make sure that we send them out regular kind of messages of thanks for that. But it has reshaped the way that we look at volunteers within the hospice, and there are certain areas of the hospice that probably won't have the amount of volunteers that it had prior to COVID because things have changed. And some services are going more digital, so we wouldn't need the volunteers there for those things. But I think it's made people want to volunteer more. It's made people, especially a lot of the volunteers that we've registered since I've been here, are people that were started their retirement just as COVID happened. And then they went straight into a lockdown and realised that they didn't want to just sit at home and do nothing. They actually wanted to get out and do something. So it's encouraged, I think, people a little bit more to get out and do something and to just socialise and meet people. But it has changed things, and it has changed the way that we look at things. And we've changed from being more ad hoc to being more structured with shift patterns in shops. But it has given people more choice. And also what Ian kind of briefly touched upon earlier is that a lot more of our volunteers now are getting involved with other things. So people aren't just doing one role. Because of TeamKinetic, we're able to send them so much communications out. They're learning more about
you can cross-promote.
And they're wanting to get involved in a lot more things. So they will be doing multiple volunteering opportunities for us at any one time, which is fantastic. So for us, it's the focus really is to recruit new volunteers, because we're always going to need new volunteers. Things do change, but to also engage more with the community. So look at working more with the probation service, the prison service, as we have been, but look at community groups, look at colleges, look at sixth forms, and try and really engage as much as the community, because that is what kind of helps Willowbrook thrive, is that community spirit. So by engaging with those groups, we can really kind of
It enriches,
yeah.
Of course, that diversity enriches the offer that will, and takes Willowbrook into other communities that people may not necessarily be as aware of it as the more traditional sort of community of St Helens is. That's all been really, really interesting. I guess just to close, it's what are the ambitions now for you guys in terms of a service as a hospice? What next for Willowbrook, and what next for volunteering at Willowbrook in terms of what's the big picture for 2022?
Well, I think for us, for volunteering, just to go back, is really what Nicola said, and I think we'd like to expand it into the community, helping youngsters expand our Compassionate Neighbours scheme, which falls under us, and be more out there in the community, because you touched on it before, that it is a community organisation, but you only really know about it unless when you're affected by it. Like anything else in life, you don't necessarily touch it. So it will be good to have it's seen as, and I think it's the word hospice, because I think hospice, and being morbid about it, hospice and death, if you asked anybody, is in the same bracket. Whereas actually, yes, that is the case, but it's very much not the case as well. And it's to get that message across as well. Perhaps use this Living Well building, which is away from the hospice site, in more of a community way. But also engage people who haven't come across us before. I mean, that's partly fundraising as well as ourselves. And I think for the hospice itself, I know they're looking to make all the bedrooms single rooms, because we had a double bedroom and a triple bedroom, which obviously went down to one person per room during the pandemic, and they want to keep it like that. So they're looking at a big refurbishment project there, which obviously costs a lot of money.
Of course.
And really expanding the use of this building here, because it's an open and free public building. So the more we can get in, the better, really. And I'm sure there's other plans that are way above my pay grade that are going on as well. So I think it's things like that, really. But for me, and perhaps Nicola as well, I don't know if she agrees, is more engagement with the community.
Definitely. And I think as well, it's also worth mentioning that it's our anniversary year this year coming up. So it's the 25th anniversary. So hopefully it will be a year of celebration for us as well, and really kind of valuing the volunteers that have been with us, because some of them have been with us since the beginning. So really kind of looking at how volunteering has changed from 25 years ago to now, and how it will continue to change.
We had a very interesting discussion with another hospice client who said they measure their long service in decades, and I really like that. It's not they don't measure it in years or 2-year periods. It's decades with the organisation. I think that's a wonderful sign that an organisation's got a good culture of looking after their volunteers and making them feel special and welcome.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for your time, guys. It's been really appreciated. I can't thank you enough. We're going to hopefully pop this out in the next week or two and share it, hopefully with all our existing clients, and potentially pulling some new clients as well. So thank you so much, and we'll hopefully see you all soon. And congratulations on your 25th anniversary.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.